I guess. Okay. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Ann Saldivar. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer from Jordan. I worked in a special education center focused on students with profound autism, and then did some side projects with women's health, reproductive health, and cancer screening kind of stuff. And I'm super grateful to be here at UT Austin as the on-campus recruiter. I just wanted to say I work full-time at the University of Texas at Austin within Texas Global. And Texas Global is the global hub for any sort of international programming happening at the university. Passport office, international students, education abroad, which is where I am, all sorts of programming. So I work 20 hours a week as the Peace Corps recruiter through a Peace Corps contract. And so I just wanted to briefly address, there have been a lot of changes on campus with Senate Bill 17 outlining diversity, equity, and inclusion officers, offices, and any sort of mandates. And so that has changed, how we can and can't do certain work. We are allowed to have guest speakers. We're allowed to talk about these things in courses and celebrate all of the wonderful commemorative months, such as Pride Month and Black History Month. And I also wanted to say Peace Corps itself is its own separate federal agency. And so as such, they very much do have diversity, equity, inclusion, and access as a huge feature of their programming, their recruitment, retention for volunteers and staff. So I just wanted to let people who log on or watch this recording in the future know that's kind of, I'm in between those two worlds, and that's the situation right now. So I just wanted to address that. And then more importantly, welcome our guests here today from the Austin area. We have a volunteer joining us from Kosovo. And so I will just let people introduce themselves. Maybe I'll just go in the order I see you on the screen, and people can go through and just introduce yourself, maybe say where you served in Peace Corps, and anything else you might want to share. Okay, Michael, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. I'm Michael Kemp. I served in the Peace Corps in Senegal, 77 to 80. I initially went over to run the swimming program at the National Center for Physical Education. So if you wanted to be a PE teacher in Senegal, you had to graduate from the school and you had to learn to swim. And I was there for doing that job for about a year, and my counterpart, my Senegalese counterpart, was really sharp and picked up really quickly. So after a year, I was kind of twiddling my thumbs and found a way to get into serving in an agricultural capacity in the bush, where I lived did the more traditional back then, living in a grass hut, dirt floor, no running water or electricity, and did that for 2 years. And this is 1977, so Elton John hadn't even come out yet. So it was quite a time where you had to more prove yourself and then let people find out about your whole self and being gay and all that good stuff. Even in the recruitment phase, you didn't really talk about it much. And it wasn't really, I don't know if I had come out openly whether I would have gotten a job in a Muslim country, or gotten an appointment in a Muslim country. But I got in, and even within Senegal, of course, being a Muslim country, I found it to be more important to respect the the culture. And the way I view things is that, you know, we all have our own paths of enlightenment, and so do different cultures in my mind. I just went over, offered what I could teach and share and learn, and they were the most loving, giving people I ever met in my life. And there was an interesting thing in the Senegalese culture in my village, even on the village level. In Wolof, a man is a goor and a woman is a jiggin. Well, there were these men who dressed as women, and they were called goorjiggins, and they were accepted as who they were. And yeah, they teased them, made fun of them a little bit, but they were not in a violent or dangerous way. They, you know, it was a loving group of people. So that was an interesting take back then, but I just kind of did my job. There were a few volunteers that were gay that I had friendships with, and people found out about me over time, because if anybody ever asked me, I never would deny. So that's just kind of who I've always been. But overall, it was a great experience. And I stayed 3 years, and extended a year, and came back to UT, where actually I was a part-time recruiter on campus at UT, and things were starting to become a lot more open. And I'm just grateful that we have a Peace Corps today that celebrates Pride Month and is inclusive. And my advice is just to, as I said, respect the culture you're going into, and then one-on-one people you can open up to, and you know, you kind of know who you can open up to and who you can't. We know that about Texas. There's places in East Texas where I'm pretty quiet. So that's about all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Matt, would you like to go next and just introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Matt. I'm reporting live from Pristina, Kosovo today. I'm a current volunteer in what we call the community organization development sector. I think Peace Corps Global calls it community economic development. Doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of acronyms. But I'm here in Kosovo. I've been here for 8 months. I've got 19 months left of my service. I'm really enjoying it. We call this the Posh Corps over here. We're the Balkans. We're in Europe. I have hot water. Sorry, guys. I know you probably didn't. But we got hot water. I've got a 3-story house all to myself. Everyone's experience in Kosovo in Peace Corps is a little bit different, but I think I got the digs over here.
Nice. Katie, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Katie Coyne. I use she, they pronouns. I served in Peace Corps in Fiji starting in 2010. So everyone laughs about that because wow, it wasn't posh. I didn't have a 3-story house or hot water. But I did live in a village where I had a bamboo raft for a brief amount of time and got to go pole out to the reef and to this nursery of giant clams that I was helping the fisheries department monitor. And you know, there were a lot of things I loved about that experience. My focus academically was always coastal and marine science. Just a little more context about who I am now. I do climate and environmental consulting work. Most recently was the environmental officer for the city of Austin. And then I also do a lot of LGBTQ advocacy work, among other things. So I'm on the Emeritus Board of Equality Texas, which is the largest lobbying and advocacy organization in the state for LGBTQ plus rights. And then I'm also joining the Advisory Council of UT School of Architecture. So if any architects or folks who are in that school are particularly interested in Peace Corps, I might be able to relate even more. I have a balance of experiences I can talk about from Peace Corps. I've always been this queer, like even before I knew I was queer, and I don't really know how to hide it. And, you know, I have had some mixed experiences in Peace Corps and with the kind of support I gave, or that I was given. And I can talk more about that a little bit later, but I actually couldn't complete my service because I was evacuated from my village after being outed.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Okay, Erin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Erin Miller. I also I go by she, her pronouns. And I served in the Gambia in West Africa. So,
Nice.
just inside Senegal, as we used to say, from 2006 to 2010. So I also did a third year. I was technically an environment volunteer. So I lived in the small rural village and the no water, the no electricity. I did luck out and had access to a solar German camp that had been built by the forestry department at one point. So I say technically because I sort of say I always had 3 lives in Peace Corps. I had my village life where I did sort of my typical village projects. I ended up doing, probably more stuff at the school and small enterprise development than really agriculture. But did, helped build a large agriculture, multipurpose agriculture area in my village. But then also very early on in my service, I started training new volunteers. It came about because our Peace Corps medical officer happened to be an American, which is very rare, but she had married a Gambian and so was working as a Gambian local, but was an American. And so she ran a training for volunteers that addressed topics like being queer in country, which was even in 2006 when I joined, a very rare thing. When I went through my interview process, I was open about being gay. I do not believe Peace Corps handled it very well, and so I decided to make it better. So in my training life in Peace Corps, I started with that session and kept training new volunteers and did a lot of that in my service. And then in my sort of third life, I did LGBTQ activism as a Peace Corps volunteer, not in my country, because it also was a Muslim country and was one of those situations where you did need to feel out what was safe because unfortunately, even in the time since Michael served in Senegal, that country shifted a lot. When I was in Peace Corps, there were some murders of gay Wolofs actually up in Senegal. The president of my country at the time threatened to behead all gay people while I was in service, and just was not very happy with the support that I got from Peace Corps, so I decided to make it better. So I founded an LGBTQ support group for volunteers in my country. We helped spread those across West Africa, and we did specific work with Peace Corps in DC, with support from my country director and some of the other country directors. A lot of it around some of the other medical officers that volunteers had in West Africa that were host country nationals and were not very open and very closed off to helping folks in our community get the healthcare that they needed. And then when I returned from Peace Corps, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I worked for the Human Rights Campaign, so the largest LGBTQ organization in the country. And while I was there, I continued to do some work with Peace Corps in terms of helping them set up systems that were better to support LGBTQ volunteers. Was lucky to do that as sort of a side of my work at HRC. They were helping with some issues, and when I was in DC, they launched actually the initiative to allow same-sex couples, married couples, to serve. And I did some conversations with the folks planning that. So since my time there, I do believe that they, as an organization, obviously they are hosting these. I think this is the third or fourth one of these that I've done since I've been back. And I've, have had friends and have chatted with a lot of other folks that have served since I served. And I know the process has been much better, much more open in terms of talking about what you're getting into. You can choose where you want to serve now. And so you sort of have the opportunity to put yourself in a situation that you are comfortable with. I am a big fan of going where you can be uncomfortable. I think that's the biggest part of Peace Corps, but knowing where your limits are and where it is safe for you physically and mentally to be able to serve in the long term. So I'm always happy to talk about more in-depth strategies about setting yourself up for success in the Peace Corps. Since I have, at the very end of my service, I did come out to my my Peace Corps training colleagues that I worked with, so host country nationals. Was received probably 10,000 times better than I ever thought it could be. And really got to have amazing conversations with them. I've been back to visit once. I still keep in touch with a lot of them. And it's long-term cultural change takes a long time, but it's those one-on-one relationships that you build with people that I think make the most impact in your service to begin with, whether if it's in your agriculture work, your work you're doing in schools, or in the relationships that you're building to have that cross-cultural exchange. That's such an important part of Peace Corps. And now I do DEI work for a living. So honestly, the work that I did in Peace Corps really did help the foundation for me to be able to get into advocacy work at HRC and eventually into the field of DEI work at a tech company now.
Thank you so much for all of that, and thank you for your service. And I served in 2010, and I know there was a pretty robust support from both in-country and American staff members, but also amongst Peace Corps volunteers. But I'm sure a lot of that carried over from the work you were doing in West Africa. You know, we had a colleague who had been in Benin, for example. You know, all of these things, they really evolved not just your community, but the Peace Corps community at large, at least on the American side, and supporting the volunteers. And I know in my cohort, it was really important to have peer support, but it's different when you can have also staff support. And I agree with you that you know, you do have to balance what you're willing to share with your community to feel comfortable being yourself, and also protecting your own mental health and physical safety. And so I applaud you for all of that work and everything that people are dealing with and throughout their service. So thank you for all of your service and continued service. I'm gonna this is just a picture of where Peace Corps is serving. I think we're in 58 countries right now. So just wanted to show that. And then just to move forward with some of these questions that I wanted to ask you all. And I also wanted to just shout out to Alexandra Warren. She's another recruiter with headquarters, and I attended one of her sessions she did. And so these are pretty much her slides. So I just want to give her credit and say thank you, because it was very thoughtfully put together by headquarters. So just, I guess, whoever, you know, whichever order you want to go in, we can just say in reflection, how did Peace Corps help you push social equity and inclusion at your post? I know some of you already touched on that, but if you want to expand on your answer, or if anyone else wants to add anything.
I can talk about this a little bit. I mean, there are LGBTQ people everywhere in all of the cultures that you're going to be a part of if you join Peace Corps. And how out folks can be is highly variable. And I think my experience, similar to Michael's, was that particularly with folks with more expansive gender and sexuality, there was an accepted version of what that looked like in Fijian culture that I think was really interesting for me to see. It was very acceptable for folks assigned male at birth to be more effeminate and sit with the women during ceremonial events, during nightly kava grog sessions where we were drinking kava. But it was really unacceptable for queer women, particularly more masculine presenting women, to, I don't know, move up the ladder, if you will, on the kind of societal ranking. And so you really didn't see queer women in villages. That was something where queer women were moved to the cities. That's where they were safe in Fiji. And I think it also varied widely in what village you were in. There were some villages where there was a Peace Corps volunteer who called their village Little San Francisco, because it was totally different than what I just described. And then there were other villages that were really conservative. And I think a lot of that actually had to do with white colonizer missionary culture that had influenced a lot of the religious ideology of Fijians, which was very counter to the very warm, loving, familial, come eat kind of reception that you got no matter where you went. I think in terms of, the reason I talk about queer folks exist everywhere, people could tell I was queer, and it was a little bit more of kind of a don't ask, don't tell policy. But I got to have, I think, what felt like really good supportive relationships with queer folks in rural places because I was more obviously queer and they felt safe to connect with me. I think on the kind of more formal route, so I was an integrated environmental resource volunteer. And I focused on marine protected areas and fisheries ecology and worked with the fisheries department and did coastal restoration and reforestation workshops. But my secondary position, which, depending on the country, I've heard different stories about kind of some of the secondary work that volunteers end up doing and how much independence you have and figuring out what that looks like. Some people are like, wait, what? You did something in addition to your main thing? I didn't know that was even really I don't know. But I sought out work that was going to help me make me feel supported. And so when Aaron talks about having a few different, I don't know, lives, I can't remember how you said it, but I had my village life that was very don't ask, don't tell, supporting queer folks in the village, but really focusing on environmental work. I had my secondary job, which I formed myself working with a nonprofit called the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. And they were working on gender and LGBTQ rights in country and would host a cohort of young leaders that they had allowed for queer folks and women to all be a part of. And I would teach workshops on the connection between gender and the environment. And I was out, it was a much different environment, mostly folks who lived in cities and were interested in advancing that kind of advocacy work in country. And then I had my life with my Peace Corps volunteers who I was very out and queer and could be fully myself and go to some resort and order a pina colada and just be this dyke over here. And so it was a full range. But, I think that's kind of that balance when you're in Peace Corps, figuring out how to honor who you are with how to be impactful in your service.
Thanks so much. I know we had it was a similar situation in Jordan. I mean, I'm sure that's similar right everywhere where there's different levels. And then, I don't even want to say too much about like where we would meet up just for the safety and security of people who live there, Thank you. Did anyone else want to talk about how Peace Corps maybe helped you push social equity and inclusion at your post?
I can talk a little bit about it. Oh, sorry, Aaron, I think you were about to go.
No, please go.
So it's a slow process. This is a very patriarchal, very misogynistic society, and you don't change culture in a day. But I'm put in the place of a whole lot of really dirty men, and I, as a white male, can help to shape their responses to certain things. So a lot of it's just me pivoting conversations when things aren't going in a way that honors other people to something more positive. I don't get a whole lot of traction in there, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and and so there's a little bit of social inclusion and equity that happens with just these little pivots throughout the day. And then they ask me questions. Why do you think that? And here where I am, the hierarchy, almost everyone will tell you, God comes first, America comes second, and then their family comes third, because America saved them in the NATO bombings in '99. So the Albanians that I work with, it's God, America, and then family. And so for whatever reason, as an American, I have some power in their life on some of these things, and they hear during Pride, they celebrated Pride Week. Mostly it's only in the capital, but the capital is becoming more and more progressive. But they celebrated Pride Week last week. Yeah, no, it was 2 weeks ago. I forget what week it is anytime. But they celebrated Pride Week, and the Prime Minister marched this year. I think it was the first time he marched in Pride Week parade. And then almost every ambassador did as well. And then the ambassadors all had a speech talking about this. And so it pushes society forward bit by bit. it is interesting to watch that. So I've been able to make some friends with some of the human rights organizations here, and hoping to do some projects with them as I get further into my service. But Katie, it was interesting you talked about the secondary projects. My primary, I do nothing. Like, I have 0 tasks. So all of my work is secondary projects. So I sit in the office for my primary, and I work on my secondary projects all day long. So I'm usually just dreaming.
Mine was the opposite. It was so intense, physically and emotionally intense, like where at the end of the day I plopped down, but I served with my spouse, and it was a similar situation to you where then he basically had to create a project. And yeah. It's interesting how that shakes out. I always tell people you can apply for a specific place and a specific job, but just remain open, because you don't know how that project is actually gonna, roll on the ground, or your partner, or, yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I mean, I think that is there's a couple really good points in here. First off, I came from the days where we didn't get to pick where we went. So we're sometimes a little snarky about folks getting to like pick their place and pick their role. And I think, building resilience and being flexible is one of the best skills that I came out of Peace Corps with. And I'm not sure if I would have had that if I would have picked where I wanted to go and where I wanted to see, because exactly like you said, you never get what you think you're going to get with Peace Corps. Each country is very unique. The staff in each country is very unique. The sites at each country is very unique. And then the roles at each of those sites and what's available to you, you can never put in a job description to translate that all the way to where you're serving. So biggest piece of advice is be very, very flexible with where you're choosing to go. And if you are able and you're so adventurous to check the box that says, I'll send you wherever I need you, you may end up in the Gambia like me, being like, the what? The real country when you get your assignment, and staying well over. I did a third year and then stayed another half a year after that on my own to finish out some projects, including training some volunteers. So be very open, be very flexible. And then at the same time, I think it is important to recognize the role that privilege plays when you walk into these communities. And it's going to play very differently in each community, but you are going to have privilege. You're going to have privilege as an American. You're going to have privilege as someone living in that country. And even though Peace Corps says you live at the means of the people that you live with, you're still going to be the best well-off person in your village. And you're going to be going to the capital for trainings, and you're going to be able to buy cheese when you go there. If that's what you want to spend your money on. And you're going to get privilege within the culture in different ways. So mine was actually the opposite of Katie. Like, as a white person, even though I was a white woman, I was invited into spaces in my village that the women in my village were not. And I was respected in a way that the women in my village were not. I was able to have conversations with the elders and the elder men, and talk about what projects were important to that village, and they would come to me and ask for help and support in different ways than they would with women. Now, I would say at the end of the day that women were really the ones running that village. But then also they were also subjected to really bad female genital mutilation in my site, and we did work in that space. So you're going to definitely have privilege, and you need to be very aware of that, even walking in as a marginalized identity in different places. So it's positive and it's negative, because you do want to really adapt and live with your culture, but that's just not the case. And I think when we talk about social equity, having that opportunity to really step in and understand your privilege in these situations makes what I hope for folks to come back and be more effective in utilizing and communicating that privilege to fight for whatever is your, sort of your passion when you get back. I was very lucky. I was raised in Oregon. My mom was a sex ed teacher. I never had to come out, and I had to basically, the first time I went in the closet was when I went into Peace Corps. And so you put yourself in situations that are invaluable for learning not only about yourself, but about the country and about the world, and how and where you can make an individual impact. And I always told new volunteers when they came in to serve, if you're here to change the world, you're going to have the worst service. You're going to leave. You're not going to make it through probably training. Like, you cannot have that mindset. You have to have the mindset that you are going to change the lives of a few individual people and go in and build those relationships. So while I was never out in my village, I came out to some of my Peace Corps staff members, as I mentioned. And since I've left, I've maintained relationships with folks in my village. I have some of my host brothers that are on my social media that very much see me and my wife running around town with our pug and my former baby dog, and still have very, very good relationships with them. And I took my former partner back to my village after I had been there, after I'd left for like 3 or 4 years. She had a great experience. And again, there's some of that, like, I knew people there knew, but they welcomed me back with open arms, but we didn't talk about it openly. And the culture, again, shifts very differently at different times.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Aaron, it's kind of interesting to hear the changes that happened in Senegal post 1980. I guess it's kind of sad for me to hear that, but yeah, I did hear word about that from others that one of my best friends in the Peace Corps moved on to USAID, and he became Derek Yandarianik was his name. We're still good friends. I think one of the good things you have going on in current volunteers is that technology has made it has given you the ability to stay in touch with people in your village. For me, we had no cell phones, we had no internet. There was the written letter, and there was, of course, I couldn't even mail a letter to my village if I wanted to. We didn't have the mail system didn't go that far. So I'm kind of jealous that you're able to stay in touch. They're just memories for me and photographs. But yeah, one-on-one was the way I communicated and tried to shape people's beliefs. And once you have a relationship established with anyone, that goes, especially here in the US right now, you have that relationship, they're more likely to figure you out. I've got a younger sister who's an evangelical, and we just went through that struggle, and I'm age 68 right now. So it's an ongoing thing, I guess, and I'm hoping this doesn't continue to slide backwards.
And I think Katie, thank you for sharing some about the impact that you saw in the Fijian culture, because it happens everywhere, right? There are other organizations sending people with different beliefs to places to proselytize. I don't think that Peace Corps volunteers proselytize. I do think they build authentic, genuine relationships in a very different way than most other organizations I see, come in and step into communities in not the most authentic way. So I will always promote Peace Corps. I think if people are nervous about serving for any reason, there is a support for you. There are places that you can go, and I really do genuinely believe that Peace Corps as an organization has, even, as you mentioned, in 2010 was when I left. And I know when I left, they were significantly better than I went. That was only 4 years. I think it's hard in our culture right now, in the political divide that we have in the US, to think about Peace Corps as a governmental agency. It is. At the end of the day, it is. I served when Bush was president. I was in country when Obama got elected. I remember the excitement that we had sitting in West Africa, watching a man of African descent get elected, and then I remember the devastation I've gone through when Trump was trying to defund Peace Corps. So it's a roller coaster ride, but I do genuinely believe some of the rules that Peace Corps has in place on not being political when you're in your countries have helped it be a bit more resilient to the changes that we've seen politically in the US. I can't speak from personal experience because I didn't serve when Trump was president, but Peace Corps is still here. It is resilient, and we need folks to go over and serve, and then come back and be advocates and allies for the organization to remain to hold those strong bounds. So it can get tricky too when you think about how politicized LGBTQ issues are in some countries, and Peace Corps doesn't want you to get involved politically. So that is another thing to consider as you navigate where you're looking at choosing to serve, and finding ways to, as Katie, I think brilliantly did, found ways to do the work in a way that was supported in the community and didn't violate Peace Corps rules.
And I think it's important to say that it's not Peace Corps' job to change other countries' culture to be more accepting of LGBTQ folks. I think this is much more about how does Peace Corps support volunteers in figuring out their level of comfort in trying to be impactful volunteers. And also, sorry, by the way, if I'm slightly distracted, it's because my partner keeps distracting me asking about catch-up questions about y'all because she served in Mauritania in like 03 or something like that. So she was like, wait, West Africa? What?
And she got a waste. And I know she did, because those Mauritania balls really went wild. It was the West Africa Invitational Softball Tournament.
She
Oh, wow.
literally, I was smiling because she just did a cheer that I think she did against what country are you from again? Did you say
Gambia?
Yeah. She just did whatever cheer from that softball tournament that she and the Mauritanian volunteers used to taunt y'all with. So
Yeah, they did. Yeah. They were better than us, but
I love it. So you're kind of already answering like how we can push equality and understanding here at Peace Corps and actions volunteers can take. And I think just to add on to something you were saying, Erin, I know that there is some controversy about like the new recruitment, and I was one of the volunteers that definitely like had my hand in changing that, because I didn't volunteer until my early 30s. So when Carrie Hessler-Radelick came to Jordan and said, why do we have so many people early terminating here? I was like, well, I kind of had a weird recruitment. Like, I understand that they desperately needed people for special education, but I have a small sliver of experience in that. But I've been working for almost the whole last decade in HIV and like harm reduction and all this. So like, I can't even talk about these things in Jordan. Like, we're not doing that work here. So it just kind of seems, and I had studied French, so it just kind of didn't make sense. And she really listened. And I know I wasn't the only volunteer that felt that way, but like that, I think that was where it was coming from. And so I hope the other recruiters, I know when I'm talking to students or just people interested in general with Peace Corps, that, what you were saying, the project, yeah, sure, that's important. But the most important thing is the one-on-one individual relationships. Like for me, I think the main goal, the mission is promoting friendship and peace. And so it really is a people-to-people diplomacy. And while we're not there to change the culture of wherever the host country is, I agree with Katie, like we are American citizens working for a government agency and require whatever support necessary. It's not just about physical safety, but also just, our mental and spiritual health as individuals, being able to be our full selves at work. And no matter where you go, I think even, if you pick a place you want, I think it's okay for people to say, I want to go somewhere where I'm going to feel more comfortable wearing a hijab, or I want to go somewhere where I feel like I'm not going to be as risk for physical harm being gay. Or so like, I think when it comes to like picking places, that was kind of, it had a good purpose. It wasn't like for people to feel entitled or to like inflate their expectations about like, I'm going to be doing this very specific thing in this, you know, even when you pick your place or your job, I think what I tell students is have as open mind as you possibly can and know that it's just like relationship building, and you're gonna have to like do a lot of self-care and self-searching to, because you're putting yourself out there. And as a fellow, you know, especially white American volunteer, also what Erin said, nothing is going to bring your privilege to light in the world as much as like walking into wherever you go as a Peace Corps volunteer. So I appreciate you bringing up, you know, all of those things. And I don't want to talk too much because I want to hear what you all have to say. But I just can't, I think it's part of the recruiter. I can't stop. I'm a talker.
And I can speak to what you were just saying, actually, because I was of the era where I got to say a little bit more preference on where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. It wasn't I got to pick this and this job, but I was pretty open with my recruiter and loved my recruiter and said, I don't want to go to Africa. I don't want to go places where homosexuality is criminalized, and I know I won't feel safe. So that's part of why I went to Fiji, and it was, I think, on its face safer than other places for queer folks. But I think also there were some conflating factors in me having an experience where I was outed and it became unsafe, and that had nothing to do with my queerness. And I think that story I will try to tell the briefest version of it because I want other folks to have a chance to talk. But I mean, my counterpart in my village was the person who outed me. I was not out to him. He was going to trainings in the capital city, and, you know, turning in his reimbursement forms to Peace Corps, but he was lying about modes of transportation and certain things to try to get more money. I had no idea about any of that. Peace Corps knew and called him out on it, and he thought I told them. So then he maliciously outed me because it was obvious, but it was like a don't ask, don't tell thing. So it was weaponized in a way I wasn't expecting, even though me just existing wasn't really an issue. But it also led to me being 3 villages over, talking to the chief about their marine protected area, and getting a call from my country director saying, hey, it's not safe to go back to your village because he just outed you, and then also said you were trying to recruit girls to be gay. And that you need to go to the nearest town and stay in a hotel and not leave the hotel. And I had another volunteer and staff pack my house up.
I'm so sorry.
And lived maybe for like a month, a little over a month, on a guest room in another Peace Corps volunteer's house in the capital or in a hotel. And I think how we could push for more support for queer folks, and maybe this has changed, but I didn't have any mental health support during that time. Like the only mental health support I had in Peace Corps was the 3 therapy sessions after I left, which were critical, but it was also the lowest point in my life in terms of my mental health. And, you know, there's a lot of silver lining. Like the first therapist I went to is post Peace Corps. Getting into Buddhism and meditation and spirituality was because of how low I was and that I needed that foundation of connecting back with myself. But in process, there was not good support. They said, look, we can't get you another permanent position. We are trying to get a house through the fisheries department up to our standards. And they started fixing up a house, and I started working for the National Fisheries Department, and it was safe for me to be in the capital. And then a senior fisheries official said, hey, that house looks really nice. I'm going to move my family into it. And Peace Corps said, well, we're not going to pay for you to stay here on our dime anymore. You can start your service completely over in another country, or we can send you home and you can be in our PCV. So yeah, that's
Yeah, that's
went
not ideal. And I'm not, you know, going to say, oh, Peace Corps does everything perfectly all the time. I had a very different situation around sexual assault where I needed support and didn't receive that properly. And I want to say Peace Corps has evolved. They've made actual, you know, a lot of it was spurred by the tragedy of Kate Pusey's death. They created a lot more support around how they handle this sort of information and the follow-up support for victims of crimes and sexual assaults and everything. And when I did graduate school, and then it was like around 2014, I did an internship at Peace Corps HQ while I was looking for jobs in DC. And I was in the counseling and outreach unit and helping with medevac stuff and cleaning the data for sexual assault data analysis that they were doing specifically. So I can just tell you from my experience being at HQ, since that time, they have on-site licensed therapists for each time zone where Peace Corps is, so that there are mental health therapists available to you during, business hours, whatever your time zone is. I don't know, how that's communicated out in the field. I don't think that existed when I was there, or I didn't know about that. But that has happened. Also, I was sitting in the meetings with the therapist discussing, this is how the law defines non-aggravated assault versus aggravated assault versus rape, or, whatever. I don't want to get into the weeds of that. But there was a lot of thoughtful work by licensed mental health professionals on evolving the response to victims of all sorts amongst Peace Corps staff and volunteers who need mental health support. And I'm sorry that you experienced that. I also had a very shaky exit of my service. And that's not, volunteers deserve all the support, especially, we all have had this awakening with COVID, right? Mental health is an important part of our health in general. We knew that before, but I think it was a bigger thing now. So I'm sorry that happened to you. And yeah, I echo that there needs to be a more transparent, cohesive response that I think is happening now. I'm not at headquarters. I'm working part-time as a recruiter. But I believe that is what is happening now.
I can just tell you from IST, we just finished in-service training, and it was the same as in pre-service training. They give us the list of resources. There's a lot of resources now, which is good. I haven't used any of them, so I can't speak to the quality, but in Kosovo, we're told that there's only one, sorry, I'm in a public park, so there's background noises. There's only one psychologist in the country that meets U.S. government standards, is what I've been told. So they refer us out to U.S. Healthcare providers through their network. But then there's also coaching. They have coaching from RPCVs. If it doesn't need mental health, but it needs more like, hey, you got this, champ, kind of stuff, you can get coaching from RPCVs. That's another resource. They have the PC Saves helpline, which is for it's anonymous. So if you don't trust Peace Corps with your sexual assault information, you can call this number, and there's trained people there. There's a lot of resources now. And you're right, it was because of responses from some of these things, but there are many options. We do have a little stigma. We feel, and I say we collectively as the chatter among volunteers, feel like if we engage some of these, they may send us home. So I think it's probably underutilized still, because we have this fear that, we're going to get medically separated if they feel like we're too much of a hassle or something. But I don't think that's actually indicated. I think it's just fear because, we're fearful people.
I know we only have a few minutes. And I love to hear about the new resources. I did find, as I mentioned, I've found a few. You're going to find advocates and support within the system. And sometimes, unfortunately, there's things they can and cannot do. But you're making change and difference for other folks down the road. And I love to hear that they even have a list of resources. We didn't have that. I got medically evac'd. They thought I had flesh-eating bacteria. I did not, but I got sent to DC. And I will say I received some of the best medical care that Peace Corps paid for everything. I did actually have access to, I think they were social workers on staff at Peace Corps to talk to while I had been medevaced, and that was many years ago. So I think as a world and as a country and as a society, our conversations around mental health have evolved. And I will say, at least of the government agencies I've been involved with, I've worked for the state government of Texas. I worked for in DC amongst a lot of government agencies that Peace Corps does tend to be, in my opinion, on the forefront of really being open to making those changes and hearing from folks. And at the end of the day, they are held accountable by Congress. And so they maybe aren't as fast as we would like them to be, but I will say they are probably faster than most other government agencies. So on a positive note, I just wanted to end with a fun anecdote on a positive note. As I mentioned, I served in a Muslim country, very strict gender roles. And I always got to joke with my fellow Peace Corps volunteers that it was actually easier for me to date in Peace Corps. I dated a couple other Peace Corps volunteers, and they would come to my site and they would stay with me in my hut, and we would walk around the village. And, you know, the village loved when Mariama came to visit, and they just thought she was my friend visiting. And then my straight friends that were dating another Peace Corps volunteer, it was seen as very taboo for them to have someone of the opposite gender come with them and stay in their hut. So we always you know, got to find definitely some of the positives as well of, you know, sort of turning the culture a little bit and being like, okay, here's what I'm doing. My closest site mate happened to be also a gay man. And so they often, he would come visit me, and we always thought it was funny as well, because they of course thought we were together, and that, you know, 2 rice fields next to each other, the water will overflow. I think they still think that I'm back in America, married to Jim, and he's very happy with his partner living in Alaska now, and I'm here. But they still ask about Tala when I call back. So there are definitely ways in which you can also have fun, and utilize some of them maybe harder aspects of the culture to your benefit, and you know, enjoy it. And I think almost everyone here has said that you're going to have a very supportive environment with your fellow volunteers, and that's a built-in community that you're going to walk into. And you know, I've done, like I said, a bunch of these with folks from all over, and I've never heard any volunteers say that they had a negative experience with their overall volunteer community. Sometimes 1 or 2 people, that is normal, that happens, that's life. But overall, you know, you're going to walk in with at least that community, and then you have the opportunity to sort of build your other support systems through various different means.
Thank you.
Aaron, you just reawoken some memories of this old man. And yeah, the same thing happened with me. I could take a guy back to my village and that people would think nothing about it. I could never bring a girl, as you know, just a friend girl over like that and stay in my hut. And that did happen with me with a guy a couple of times. So yeah, you're right. That was fun.
A few of my closest friends, other volunteers in Jordan, they actually met and ended up getting married. 2 female volunteers. They are married with an adorable baby now. Very similar, yeah, where straight couples had to go meet in the capital.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's time to close out, but does anyone want to say, you know, sorry, we didn't get into, you all were having such a good conversation. I didn't like stick to the, all of the questions, although you answered all of them. Does anyone want to say like, why Peace Corps? You know, why did you want to do that instead of some other, you know, Fulbright or USAID or whatever, or maybe you did those 2.
I don't think Fulbright would have taken me.
What?
Peace Corps for me, honestly, I was graduating with a history major, and from a liberal arts school in Oregon, and I didn't want to teach, and I didn't want to go to grad school right away. I will say, honestly, I have talked to people now, and I'm like, I don't know if I would have gotten into Peace Corps the new sort of requirements. They're similar requirements, but with the change in applications, I have seen a much higher caliber of professional going into Peace Corps. But that doesn't mean that if you are, like me, a liberal arts or a history major coming out of college, that you will not be accepted. I think it goes back to being more flexible about where you will go serve. And I do very much appreciate that we're getting people who have experience working in HIV clinics here in the US, going to places like East Africa and working in clinics there, and providing those level of resources. So I think the new requirements have allowed Peace Corps to match more effectively people to go do the work that the community and the countries need, and also providing the right experience for volunteers. So be trusting of the process. Listen to your recruiters. If you're like, man, I just really want to go to the Philippines, and they're like, maybe let's look at a different opportunity. I would love to go to somewhere in Central or South America. I don't speak Spanish. I'm terrible at it. So trust your recruiters, and go in with, like I said, sort of your eyes open to what you're going to learn and what you're going to take away, but then also make the most of your service. So if you know coming out of your service, some type of career path you want to have that doesn't exactly line up with your exact posting or job that you have, you, depending on your country, usually can make it, you can find your second and third opportunities. It is very sort of country specific, the flexibility you do have, but I have always found that if you are doing your core role you're there to do really well, you're going to have opportunity to do that. And you're going to find the right employers when you come back that are going to respect what you have done, achieved, and those, I hate these words because I don't believe they're true in my word in at all. Those quote unquote soft skills, in my opinion, are what are going to set you up to be more effective in anything that you do when you come back. Those are skills that can't be taught in the classroom, going from sort of school to school to school. I know when I am involved in hiring panels and hiring folks, I always want to see people who have taken some time to travel on their own, done Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, and gone out and experienced the world in a different way. So utilize those experiences when you get back, because some jobs may not understand it, but you will learn how to sell it to them, and you're going to be, in my opinion, significantly more effective in your career for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I agree. It's an indicator that you're able to be flexible and be comfortable being uncomfortable, and manage yourself in projects with limited resources and a whole host of wonderful skills.
I think for me, I wanted an adventure and I needed a job, and I couldn't get a job. So this sounded like a perfect experience. And I think in hindsight, though, I think Americans are some of the worst in terms of checking our privilege. And I think that empathy and actually being able to put my privilege right out there and be able to do more equity and justice driven work is directly related to my experience abroad. Like, I don't think I would be that person without it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to add anything, Michael or Matt?
I'd like to say that I came back from the Peace Corps with learning a couple of things. One, the United States isn't the center of the universe. And two, I was only 21 when I went, so the world was truly my oyster. And then two, that simply because another culture is different doesn't make it inferior or superior. It is just different. And I brought back, yes, that ability to work on my own individually. Yeah, there were a lot of secondary projects that came along the way. I had to create my own job after I finished the swimming part, and I didn't want to come home. And you just have to be able to think on your feet and be flexible. One of my first jobs, I ended up in the hotel industry of all things, but in food and beverage initially, and this food and beverage director who I interviewed with was from South America, and he grew up with Peace Corps volunteers around him. So I kind of had my foot in the door just by being a Peace Corps volunteer, and he knew that Peace Corps volunteers had that flexibility that you need in the business world these days. And yeah, so that's what I got out of it, and what I try to continue to contribute is every day is that kids, young people need to get out and see the world. We are too insulated in this country.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm real sorry. I'm in like the loudest point. I'm walking to the last bus back to my city. So I'm in the loudest point when I'm trying to answer. I apologize. But I started later. I'm 41. So I joined Peace Corps in my 40s.
All right.
Because I was tired of the 9 to 5. I wanted the adventure. I wanted to see the world. I'm like, if I wait until I'm retired and have enough money to see the world, I won't be able to walk up the mountain that I want to go walk up.
Right.
So now here I go hiking every weekend in some beautiful places, things that I couldn't do if I were 66 or something. Probably, I don't know, maybe I could. But it's amazing. Hey, the bus is honking at me. But it's a wonderful experience. I chose it later in life. Like you guys, I'm learning more cross-cultural experiences than I could learn in the classroom, than I could learn at home. It's just an amazing experience, and I'm looking forward to closing service, and maybe like Katie says, I shape a couple of lives, but I know that all of these people are shaping me in ways that are really good. They're helping me to grow as a person.
Thank you so much, especially Matt. Thank you so much for joining us from Kosovo, and we know you're so busy, and I just appreciate all of you being here today and sharing so much of your experiences and stories and selves. Hopefully this will help. I have several students asking me a lot of the questions that you all addressed, and it's much more meaningful to hear it directly from current serving and more recently returned volunteers. So thank you so much for your time. I just put my email here. I work specifically with UT students, but anyone can email me and I can direct them to whoever the appropriate recruiter is for resume review, motivation statement, mock interviews. People who want to do Peace Corps and work with a recruiter are more likely to get hired and serve. So thank you guys all so much for your time and for your service, and I appreciate it so much. And then also just feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to be trying to, with the new school year, try to have more panels, a combination of online and in person. So if you're interested in participating again, that would be great. No pressure, but thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and just stop the recording.
Thanks all.
Thanks.